Salut! In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you the trends on business creations in France. A few weeks ago, I did share with you the top 10 business creation I did in 2024, and I did mention I was waiting for special reports from INSEE, which is the National Institute for Statistics and Economic Studies, and every year they look at what happened last year and give us some summaries about the trends in business creations, the activities that are doing well, and so on. So this report has just been published, and I want to pick a few of those stats and share them with you. So some of those trends might be surprising to you because they're more linked to the French culture or the French economy, and for others you might say, well, yeah, actually that's what I thought or that's what I saw around me. The first thing I wanted to share with you is the stats for 2024. So INSEE confirms that in 2024, over 1 million businesses were created in France. 1,111,200 businesses. So this is an increase compared to 2023 of plus 6%. Personally, I was quite surprised because I thought that 2024 was slightly weird because we were waiting for a new government and we were waiting for a new budget. So I'm surprised that so many businesses were created, and I think the impact would be more in 2025. So this is good news. Over 1 million businesses created. And actually what INSEE is saying to us is that this increase is quite significant because for the last 2 years, it was actually minus 1% in 2023 and plus 1% in 2022. So very stable. And if we look at those, they actually show us which type of businesses increase in terms of creation. So plus 7% for micro-entrepreneurs, plus 5% for incorporated businesses. So we're talking Earl, Sol, SAS, SASU, and minus 3% for entreprises individuelles. They call them the classic entreprises individuelles. And if you heard some of my videos before, it's the one that are called entreprises individuelles under régime réel simplifié. And for me, that type of business is like the no-go for expats because it's really hard to assess your taxes. They're calculated over 2 years. So if you don't save enough money, you get into trouble. And I think that's why French people have a big dislike of the entreprise individuelle since the micro-entrepreneur was created, because the micro-entrepreneur enables you to know exactly how much taxes you'll pay, and there's no bad surprises. So I think this is quite exciting to see that it's plus 6%. As I mentioned, I would expect that in 2025, I wouldn't be surprised that it went down a bit because that's where we had another prime minister, we were waiting for a new budget, then we had the potential changes on the VAT, potential changes on Airbnbs and the global economy, so I wouldn't be surprised if it went slightly down in 2025. Now, what I also wanted to show you is INSEE is showing us how it's splitting up those business creations between entreprises individuelles and incorporated businesses. This chart is really exciting because it's showing us, exciting for a nerd like me on numbers, but it's actually showing us the evolutions of French business creation based on the type of business there are in France. It's looking at 2012 until 2024, and you can see that from 2017, 2018, the micro-entrepreneur is really picking up. There's a big gap between incorporated businesses and micro-entrepreneurs is because those are the years where the maximum turnover threshold for micro-entrepreneurs was doubled. Before it was capped at 30,000 euros, and then they decided they would increase it, so moving to 77,000 euros for services and 180,000 for buy to resell. So it kind of opened up the possibilities for people to keep working as micro-entrepreneurs. And to me, the key takings is also what we've seen before, is that we are seeing that the classic entreprises individuelles, so réel simplifié, are slowly decreasing. Incorporated businesses are also increasing, and micro-entrepreneurs. And incorporated businesses is because we can see that when a business is doing well and people want to hire employees, they have more expenses, or they want to protect the asset, the next step up would be incorporated businesses. And also, it's also a specific French trends that before the incorporated businesses was more Earl and Sol, and we had something called the SAS SASU, which was more for startups and tech companies, and actually this became more accessible to anyone. And in France, when you had been an employee for a long time, a SAS or SASU could make sense because you keep paying into a pension scheme which is similar to employees and you have a slightly better protection. So the SAS have increased, and I think to me it's also reflected in the fact that incorporated businesses are keeping increasing. So most popular, micro-entrepreneurs and then incorporated businesses. The other thing I wanted to share with you from that particular drawing is that if we look at the exact numbers, 64% of French businesses are micro-entrepreneurs. 64, basically 2/3 of all new businesses created are micro-entrepreneurs. I think if I look for 2024, I'm looking down at my numbers, it's over 716,000 micro-entrepreneurs. Then we have 26% of incorporated businesses, so 284,000. And then we only have 10% of entreprises individuelles above about 110,000. My first taking on this, either for you as an expat or for anyone, is to say, sometimes you hear people saying micro-entrepreneur isn't a real business. Why would you go for this? The stats are actually that 2/3 of new French businesses are micro-entrepreneur, and this is also the first type of business that French entrepreneurs start their business with because it's the easiest one. So if you go for one, you're just on the average scale of French entrepreneurs going for the pay-as-you-earn micro-entrepreneur business type. The second information I wanted to share with you are the leading activities for new business creation in 2024 in France. And as you can see from this nice drawing, is that the biggest increase was plus 25% for transport and storage. And here what we're actually seeing is those kind of short distance transport, a lot of e-commerce, but also in France we have a lot of platform when you sell second-hand clothes or second-hand items like Le Bon Coin, Vinted. You're seeing those where people are actually shipping and having it delivered. You can see, for instance, that in many shops you can go and collect your order, whether it's an e-commerce or whether it's second-hand. So those kind of transport is increasing. And they're also saying the kind of transport where, for instance, if a garage buys some cars from somewhere else, is hiring an external supplier for the car transport back to the dealership. So that's plus 25%. And we also see in those what they call in France the VTC, which is véhicule de tourisme avec chauffeur. So it's not an official taxi, because for an official taxi you need to buy a license, but it's the Ubers or the Bolt that you might have abroad where you have a short distance Uber driver. So that's the biggest increase, plus 2025. And then we have plus 16% for admin services and what we call services to the individuals, un service aux personnes. So in here, we're going to be seeing the cleaning services, conciergerie services, admin support services, so plus 16%. And the last one is plus 6% for commerce. So it could be e-commerce or shop, plus 6%. And then in the activities that actually tended to go down in 2024 was minus 6% for what we call the scientific and technical activities. So in there we find the consultancy work, minus 16%, and the design, minus 12% compared to 2023. So minus 6% globally, but if we compare 2024 to 2023, it's actually minus 16% for the consultant, minus 12% for design. And then the second activity that is also going down is minus 5% for anything to do with the estate agencies buying and selling properties, because the market did slow down last year. The interest rate was still quite high and there was some kind of uncertainty. So that sector also reduced in 2024 compared to 2023. Now, my taking is what's interesting on this is I can see, for instance, the plus 16% on admin services, conciergerie services, and so on. I definitely see those in expats. Some people decide to maybe not stay in France but have properties and they want someone else to manage the property. Also, the increase of Airbnbs, and where people have a holiday rental but they don't want to manage it, they tend to ask for conciergerie services as well. But what I definitely didn't see in 2024 was a reduction in terms of consultant and design, with the expats that I did register last year, and you can watch this video where I give you my top 10 of business creation in 2024. I definitely didn't see those because the consultant, communication and design still did very well. So I'm also sharing with you this table, which actually gives you the split between each activity, so you can look at the one that you're actually interested in, and it gives you the number of business created in 2024 based on the sector of activity and also based on the type of business. So for instance, if I take one line from this table, you will see that if I take commerce or buy to resell, in 2024, we had over 155,000 businesses created, 43,000 were incorporated businesses, and 93,000 were micro entrepreneurs. So if you look at those where and the total is if we add those up, we do end up with over 1 million business created in 2024. So we can see that the leading activities are commerce, so buy to resell, trade, transport. Then we also have, so we still have a lot of businesses created in what they call the scientific and technical, 160,000 companies. But as I did mention before, it was reduced compared to the year before. So it's still a significant number of companies, but they were saying that for France, it was less than in 2023. And then we have all the support services, 115,000 businesses. And then you can keep looking down. So for instance, other services and like cleaning services, 87,000 businesses. You can look and pause and see at the one that you are interested in. So for instance, if I think of expats, the hébergement and restauration, you probably are interested in because that's where we find all the gîtes and retreat businesses, all the consultancy work is under activités spécialisées. And also we have the education, which could also be, for instance, teaching online courses. So you can pause and check the sector that applies to you or that you are interested in. The next drawing that I want to share with you is actually to show you where or how this is impacted in different areas of France. So I like this map because it shows you this is the different regions in France, and you can see where the number of business creation was the most buoyant or the strongest. If you look at the dark red areas of France, we have Hauts-de-France, where you have Lille here, the red, dark red, and then we have Brittany, and then we have Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. Those are really dark red. This is when we had the strongest increase in terms of number of business created. So over 7% in those areas. So I find it quite interesting because that's not necessarily the kind of areas that naturally picked. Brittany, Lille, the north, there's a commerce, a lot of industry. Brittany, I'm surprised. And also here, Auvergne and Rhône-Alpes. Here you've got that whole area of Lyon and so on. But I'm also quite surprised that those were the kind of leading region where the increase was the strongest. But if you look at the places where expats are living, are still doing pretty well because it tends to be obviously the Île-de-France, Paris regions. But then we look at all this sign here, all the coastal areas of Brittany, Occitanie, and so on, all the kind of medium red, that's where the expats tend to live. And those areas are still between 5 and 7% in terms of increase of business creation. So that's also quite interesting. Now, the next thing I wanted to share with you is also what is the profile of the average entrepreneur or business creator in France. And if I pick a few of those stats from the reports, and I will add a link to the report so you can download and have a look at it, so you can read it. It'll be loads of stats and French lessons for you. But a few facts are interesting. So in France, 43% of new business creators are women. And if I look about 10 years ago when I was working with French entrepreneurs, about 40% of new business creators were women. So it's increased slightly to 43%. And in France, there's still a lot of schemes to help women create their businesses by giving them guarantee and bank loans, or women in tech and so on. So it's interesting to look at those for those of you who might borrow money to launch your business or to create more like a physical business with a shop. And then what I also find interesting is the average age of the entrepreneur in France. So the average business creator in France is 35 years old, and that person would be a micro-entrepreneur or entreprise individuelle. So it's not so surprising that the first business you create, you're going to be a sole trader, but the average age is 35 years old, and I think it's slightly decreased. And there's a difference also between the type of sector that you're going to go for. So for instance, if we look at entreprise individuelle, and we looked at one of those sectors, which was transport, which was booming, the age there is younger. It is 31 years old, according to INSEE. So I guess that the delivery van, the delivery sector, the Ubers tend to be younger business creators. And if you look at another sector, for instance, what they call the industry and restoration, so when we are making things or restaurants and hosting, it's 40 years old. So again, not so surprising, because if you go and create a shop or a restaurant, you're going to need to invest in that business and you're probably going to be older. So there's a slight age difference. 31 years old for people working in transport, 40 years old for people working in the industry or the restaurant sector. So let me know what you thought about this analysis from INSEE. To me, there's a few takings. The first one is definitely that 2/3 of new businesses in France are created as micro-entrepreneur. I would say that there's also probably a difference between French creators, French entrepreneurs and expats. Even if you just look at the average age, where I said that he was 35 years old for a new creator, I would tend to say that expats, probably older. I'm going to have to start tracking this year to tell you next year. But I would tend to say that it's older because usually when you come to France, you really had your career, you really work quite a bit in your own country, and you tend to move to France later on. So I would probably think they'd be more around 40 years old for the average age. But that would be an interesting one to track, which I will track at least for my own customers. And also that the type of activities might be different for expats. So it's pretty rare that for expats we'll see people working in the transport sector, but I would definitely say all the consultancy work, all the restaurant accommodation applies to you. So let me know what you thought about this analysis from INSEE. I will add the link to the full report below the video description so you can read it. It's in French, but you'll have the full stats and you can read it. I find it pretty interesting to see how things are going. So first of all, I didn't think that 2024 was so good, so that's quite interesting. That's my personal take on this. And also the fact that 2/3 of new businesses created in France are micro-entrepreneurs. To you, this might be a surprise. So it's a way as well to reassure you that many people start as a micro-entrepreneur, and as they move on or they start to have more expenses, they will move up to a different business type. So let me know also what you thought about the different activities that are there, the average age of the entrepreneur in France. And if you want to know more about the type of activities that are created by expats in France, you can watch this next video where I'm sharing with you the top 10 business activities that I registered in 2024 for expats having moved to France. Voilà, merci, à bientôt.